So a long time ago, Titan Moon had a website and created two characters that were mascots, being Hibiki and Chikagi. Now these characters would just be that until they would appear in other things such as materials explaining aspects of their characters, appearing in things like Carnival Phantasm. They even have their own manga telling a little story about them, on top of now appearing in Fate Grand Order as the Ultra Ego servant Azumi no Isora. But before I can even get into explaining their characters, I feel I should tell you about Hibiki's creator, that being the dead apostle ancestor, depending on the continuity, turned into one by Titan Moon or turned into one by Magecraft, Caubac, Alcatraz. Because he despised being an apostle, being a member of the church, he decided to turn himself into a padlock, so he had no need to suck blood. During his time, he created a holy scripture known as Triton, which is supposed to be a model of the universe based on his thesis about God's love. Having felt like he succeeded in proving his thesis that if Triton being an in-depth inspection of the Lord's love, creating a human being, that alone would be evidence pointing to that the world is made of the Lord's love. This created a problem though, in that he essentially tried to create a god, and thus was violating a creed to not do so, and thus made the castle, which would become the labyrinth, to protect Triton, but he himself would actually get stuck in there as well because of a random dimensional distortion, making it nearly inescapable. But one day Triton would escape and appear in the outside world as the girl Hibiki Hibino. Caubac believed that no true Christian would see God in themselves, thus he would start reflecting, realizing that by proving that God, which in this case would be Triton, is in fact real, he proved that they in fact aren't, thus denying, or at least trying to deny, Triton being God, because God is something that cannot be comprehended, cannot take human form, thus should not be alive, because they are an omnipresent essence, and thus they would work and try to have people search for Hibiki to bring them back so that they could surely prove that his conclusion is in fact wrong, and thus he would reject Hibiki / Triton's own nature, trying to pretend he never saw it, and thus Caubac ruined his own beliefs, coming out of his 2,000-year-long battle in total denial. But even after all this, he still did prioritize the ideal form of God's love over his own happiness and salvation. He was one of the people that saw the birth of Archwade Brunstead. In Fate Strange Fate, the master of Castor, Francesca Parlati, needs the power of the Grail or something on its level to be able to enter the labyrinth that Alcatraz made in order to find a certain something, that being Hibiki aka Triton. Alcatraz is also a character that seemingly appears in other Titan Moon works, sometimes along with Zelrech, briefly, usually in the form of a phone that he communicates through. Now so far, the closest thing the two girls have to a story is the manga MahoHako no Hako. To give you a brief overview of the story, it takes place for the most part at school. We have Chikagi, who has a complex about her sister because people want to get to her sister, and they do that through her, and thus she feels like she doesn't really have any true friends. That is until the character of Hibiki appears, who decides she wants to be Chikagi's friend, and even after finding out about her reluctant friend's dilemma, she decides she wants to continue to be her friend still, becoming Chikagi's first true friend that's there for her. And as a result, she starts to build other friendships, not around her sister, but herself. Some supernatural stuff starts to happen around their school, showing that Hibiki knows about the world of magecraft and mystery, and thus isn't surprised by these things. That is, until an incident occurs to where a girl named Serena, who used to be one of Chikagi's quote-unquote friends, shows up having gone through a drastic change, trying to gatekeep who can and can't be Chikagi's friend. This all stems from, in the past, when Chidori, Chikagi's older sister, asked Serena to be her younger sister's friend. Serena, who also looked up to Chidori. And thus, as she comes into a new power through a parasitic plant familiar, when she sees that Chikagi is actually hanging out with quote-unquote friends, she decides to get rid of them. When one of them goes missing, Chikagi is suspicious and confronts Serena. Later that night, both her and Hibiki decide to go to the pool to confront Serena, but Serena is too powerful and gets her vines around Chikagi, being tightly grasped by Serena, who yells at Chikagi saying she doesn't understand her own sister. Chikagi has to clap back and say that Chidori doesn't even remember who Serena is. Not wanting to accept this, seeing it as a lie, she throws Chikagi into the pool, which sends her into a different space. As she is sinking, she starts to think about all the new actual friends she's made, and Hibiki jumps in there, reaching out her hand. Meanwhile, on the outside, a woman that Chikagi actually ended up encountering on the way to the buffet before her friend went missing, encounters this strange woman with a bag on her head. We find out that this woman is actually a member of the church, considering at some point during the fight against Serena, she mentions Ciel. Suddenly, we see the two resurface, with Hibiki now taking the form of Triton, with a seemingly unconscious Chikagi in their arms before dropping him off by the woman from the church to stop Serena. Easily being able to stop any attacks Serena can muster. They attempt to separate the parasite from Serena, but they're unsuccessful as Serena gets away. The woman from the church is about to attempt to recapture Triton and return them home, but decides not to do so for the time being and is just going to watch. She later then joins the school, and I think also the club that Chikagi and Hibiki are in. Meanwhile, Serena appears again, apologizing for what she did and said, and asks if they could be friends again like they were in the past. Chikagi, seeming like she has no hard feelings, decides that she'll give it some thought, but we find out as she joins her new friends, deciding to let her hair down metaphorically and loosen up, that one day she's going to bring Serena into her new fold of friends. We also see that Chikagi has accepted the nickname Chika from Hibiki, showing she's willing to put down those walls and actually, in exchange, she's willing to call Hibiki by her given name and no longer by her surname, which visibly makes Hibiki very happy. And I also have a playlist where I talk about other obscure Type Moon stories you might have never heard about or forgotten.